Welcome, Isaac. Nice, very nice you will talk with me. I'm very interested in the UPSI congregation, or UPSI Pentecost movement, and you have a background from that church, so you can tell more about it. Can you tell about the UPSI Church history, distribution at home and abroad, the difference between them and Pentecost movement? Yeah, that I come from, the Pentecost movement, the difference between the two churches.
So I think what you're asking is, what was the difference between the original Pentecostals that started that movement versus the UPCI that was 1930s or 40s when they formed, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, the UPCI was more organized. They were interested in a structure where there was a president, and then there was districts, and they divided up the area into, there was presidents over each district or superintendents.
Just like an umbrella.
Yeah, they wanted everything to be fairly official.
Mm-hmm.
And they organized, they would raise donations from those districts to then send missionaries overseas. Whereas I think the Pentecostals that started the movement in Azusa Street and Topeka, Kansas, William Seymour, and some of these other founders of the Pentecostal movement in the 1900s, they were just they were local people. They didn't really build this giant organization. So what the UPCI is really just a natural progression of where things were going. People were pretty quickly divided on beliefs, right? Because there were some Pentecostals that were Trinitarian. There were some Pentecostals that were oneness only. They taught you baptize in the name of Jesus, and that's it. Like, if you baptize in the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, you weren't following the plan of salvation. You were good as lost. So we started to see pretty quickly these divisions in Pentecost, and so the UPCI was just another branch that opened up. But there was Assemblies of God. They're technically a Pentecostal denomination, just like UPCI. There was Foursquare Gospel. They were, again, another branch. There was, I want to say there's probably 12, 13 different of these branches that are all each maybe several 100,000 people. And so they're all a little different from each other. So I think the UPCI is just the largest. They're just the biggest of these structures, and they're the most well known. But there's a lot of Pentecostal subgroups that are kind of formed because of these differences in doctrine. Like some difference in how they want to focus on spreading it, or how the church services are structured, or what the standards are. And so everyone has their own ideas, and they start a different subsect, and then it goes from there. But I think the UPCI was just, they had the drive to kind of structure everything and put out missionaries and organize fundraising, and they did the best job of growing. But I haven't studied it enough to know like what the exact difference is between all these different groups. So it's that would be an interesting thing to do sometime, I suppose.
Yeah. This is Livets Tabernacle in Oslo. It's a UPC, Livets Tabernacle. Oslo, also the life of tabernacle. They started with the 70s. American movement come to Norway. Where the missionary Eddie Tille. Have you heard about him?
I think so. He might have. I've heard his name before. Yeah, at some point.
Yeah, and among the other things, initiated a collaboration with the Pentecostal Church Tabernacle in Bergen, also in my hometown. The collaboration ended with his theology become known, until he instead established a congregation in Oslo. Till I moved back to the USA 17 years ago, and the Norwegian department is today led by in Oslo. And I have a congregation in Drammen and Fredrikstad, and so you see Oslo. That is the Norwegian history here. But I see it, you're very small. I think they have a 100, 200 membership in this congregation here in Norway. So,
and Oslo is a very large city, isn't it? What's the population of Oslo?
You ask me difficult, but I shall find out. I should know it. I think it's 1 million, maybe. Yeah.
That's what I thought. It's one of the largest cities in Norway, anyway.
Yeah, yeah. It's the capital in Norway.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's always interesting. You see, they've been in Oslo for many years, decades, right? And it's difficult for them to grow. 150, 200 people in a city of 1 million. So you would think that if this is a really great thing and there's great news to spread and it's amazing, they should have no trouble getting 1,000 people or 10,000, but it's a very difficult process to convert people, and so you have to ask why. Why are they growing so slowly? But that's the devil's in the details,
There's not only them, there's other congregation. What connection did you have to UPSI in terms of family, friends, and service?
Well, my grandmother was the first convert in that local church. Mm-hmm. So this was late 1970, probably 76 or 77. So my grandmother was, I think she had 4 children with her at the time, and they became like, the church was literally a small room on our county fairgrounds, and they were just renting this small building, and they joined, they converted, and it took them probably another 5 years before they got an actual building that they were in. And they probably had 25, 30 members. At some point, her 4 children became a part of it. She had 3 daughters and 1 son. My uncle, the son, he moved away to California. He basically never became a part of it. And he still maintained some separation from that. So it's always been kind of this struggle that she prays for him, because he's the one child of the 4 that isn't a part of the church, and so the one failure, so to speak. But my mother, the 2 aunts, they all became a part of it. And so I was born into it from day one, and it was all I knew. This was my earliest memories, was being in church, being in the, listening to the preaching and singing, and that was from 3-4 years old. You know, I have these memories, and you know, they're good memories. It's you're hanging out with your friends, you're talking with your family, and you know, there was I think some people see only, you know, the negative side, but church isn't necessarily all negative. There are some good aspects of it, as far as they try to keep families together. They try to encourage people to, you know, everyone hang out and be friends with each other and be inclusive. The problems only show up after you decide you don't approve of everything, and then you're different.
Yes, I
so
know
they had
that.
a private.
Yeah,
Yes,
I know.
yes.
I know, Megan. Yes.
So they had a
Yes.
private school, and because they thought that if we send our kids to the public school, they're going to be influenced in a negative way. So they started a private school that had Christian books and curriculum, and I did that all 12 years of my education. So it's a bubble. You know, you're isolated because you go to school the entire week, and then you go to church Thursday night. You go out Saturday for door knocking and visitation, meeting new people. Sunday morning is church. Sunday night is church. Monday morning you go back to school. You know, so you're in a very isolated, you know, where it's just, you're constantly in that environment, and that's all you know. That's your entire world. And once you get out of school, now you get a job. Now it's like you're face to face with the normal life, like everybody else that's, you know, just doing their thing. And to you, the church is so big because you're a part of it every single day of the week almost. You're just there. You're there. And you don't understand why other people think it's weird, you know, to go to church 3 times a week or 4 times a week. And so you try to have some conversations and get friendships at work, but it's difficult because they're so different from you.
Yeah.
And they're talking about going to movies and TV shows, and you have no idea, you know, what they're talking about, because we didn't watch TV, we didn't watch movies. And so it's like you're in this different life, and you're just.
You're living in a bubble. I was there. Yes.
And so, yeah, my entire family was in it, with the exception of my dad's side. My uncle, my dad's side, was Mormon, and so the entire family was Mormon. And it was just weird because we're Pentecostal, they're Mormon. They're both very strict, you know, religious, but they're so different from each other. You know, it was kind of awkward. And then the rest of the family on my dad's side was just, you know, they believed in a God, but they didn't really take it seriously. You know, it was just, they didn't really care. So that
the
was
Russian, the Russian says this, yeah, this for drinking. Different life, you see, they're different life, but the bottle and
right.
I'm sorry, I don't interrupt you, but yeah.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, it's culture, right? So the Finnish and the Russians, you know, you have a lot of winter, you have a lot of cold weather. Well, you're going to be indoors and you're going to be drinking, right? So that's very common, you know. And so the culture influences the religion quite often. So in the UPCI, the culture is 1940s United States, right? That is the culture that's being exported out to the rest of the world, because in the UPCI they teach, women should have long hair, they should have long dresses, and the men have to wear, long sleeves and pants, and so when the UPCI goes into, say, a country in Africa where it's very hot, and people usually wear shorts, and they wear, short sleeves because you're sweating a lot. It's 90 degrees all the time, and they say, okay, everyone's got to wear long sleeves. Well, that's difficult because you're in an environment where it's very humid and it's very warm, and so they're trying to export 1940s USA fashion into Africa, and it just, you see a lot of women will cut their hair very short, because they're working, they're doing stuff, they can't have long hair catching on their, cooking and whatever they're doing. But yeah, so it's trying to force a culture somewhere that it doesn't make sense to do that. And same with like Scotland, in Scotland they wear kilts, so a man will wear a skirt, but the UPCI would say, no, that's effeminate, that's a shame for a man to wear a woman's clothing. But the culture in Scotland is that the kilt is very masculine. The kilt is what a man wears. It's a warrior's outfit, but they don't make exceptions for that. Everybody has to conform exactly the same, no matter what part of the world you're from, what language you speak, what your local culture is. It's very interesting, how it's.
But I will ask about experience. How did the teaching affect you growing up in your relation? Do you talk about that earlier in the interview? But we can, in the relation to school, work, friends, and family.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a problem for most of my life because I stayed in that bubble. It did make things awkward with family members outside of it, because you always had the mentality, we have to try to save them, we have to reach them, because the uncle from California, he drives up to visit, and we're like, oh, we've got a week, we've got to get him into church, he's got to hear the preaching, he's got to be saved. That's always in the back of your mind. You're not trying to just, hey, we're going to sit down and have a nice chat and we're going to hang out with someone visiting for a week. It's, can we convince them to come to church? Can we convince them to do whatever? And let's say someone's visiting and it's a Thursday, there's church service. We can't skip church to hang out with relatives, because you always have to be there. Like there's no exceptions. So you got someone that drove, 18 hours or 20 hours just to come to your house, and you're just going to leave them at home to go to church, because like the church is above everything else, as far as family, as far as friends, or anything, and for your job, if your job wants you to work Sundays, they tell you, quit your job, because you can't miss Sunday services, no matter what,
Crazy. It's crazy.
So that's where the church wants to be number one in your life over everything else. And that's where they cross the line and become controlling, where really they're just trying to run everything and make you do whatever they say. And that's where they become different from another church, you know, a Baptist, Catholic, Presbyterian, Lutheran.
Yeah.
You know, they aren't going to do those kinds of things, but these people will. So that's the difference, you know.
But do you have a strong story to tell about your about an event or witness?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's always weird stuff going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that there was a single one that defined things. Probably one of the first things I think of is so we had a pastor that started the church back in 1975, 76, whatever. And then he had a son that was kind of taking over. This was 2010, say, it was about 12 years ago. And the son, so the pastor had a business where they built houses and they did construction basically, and that was their primary job. And then the son had a landscaping business, so they'd mow lawns, you know, they'd trim plants and bushes and that kind of thing, and they would hire young kids, like teenagers from the church, to work in the landscaping business and basically, you know, teach them how to be a good employee and whatever, you know.
10 years kid.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And so they it turned out they were not paying them overtime, you know, so you work so many hours and then you're supposed to make X number of dollars overtime, and they were just not paying them. And this was 6, 7 kids that were getting cheated out of back pay. And so someone found out about it, and one of the church members filed a complaint with the Bureau of Labor and said, hey, you know, this is illegal. There was some big lawsuit, and they ended up paying thousands of dollars back to these kids, you know, because they were being treated unfairly. And when that news got out that there was a lawsuit, and, you know, the pastor's son, who was now the new pastor, was, you know, violating labor laws, there was a lot of people that basically they split, and they left the church, and they went to a second church. They started their own here in town, and so they kind of, there was a group of people that were all friends, and they all left at the same time, you know, and so they formed their own church. So that was kind of a scandal.
It's remind me child labor. This is child labor. It's not legal here in Norway. I don't know what's in. You can use the child to go with a newspaper, small jobs, but not big jobs. You are not allowed to do that.
Until what age? Like, what's the age?
I'm not sure.
Probably 18 or 20 or
no, 6, 13, maybe 11, 10, 11, 13. That's
okay. These were kids that were all these
yeah,
kids were all 15 or 16 years old, so
yeah.
it probably wouldn't apply to them.
I think it's the same here. I don't sure, but yeah, I think it's 15. Yeah, 15 years. Yeah, but you could, but you can, if you are 13, you can go with the paper.
Sure. Pretty amazing still that, you know, we can be 4,000 miles away and basically having a, I mean, it's kind of a miracle when you think about it.
It is. I'm sitting here with my hobby room, my boy room almost, and talk with you in Oregon.
So it's 3:30 your time, 7:30 in the morning my time.
Yeah. After you left UPSI, how did your family, the congregation leaders or pastor, young pastor, and friends from the congregation react?
So there was a period of time, for maybe a couple of months, where I was very strongly doubting, and I had questions in my head, and I'm kind of puzzling that out. But then there was a point where I knew some things were wrong. I knew some of the teachings were wrong. Primarily, it was the young Earth creationism. The Earth is 6,000 years old. You know, the global flood wiped out everything, and you know, I realized that wasn't true. And I had been taught my entire life that those are actual events. So that was a big deal for me. And everybody that I knew, you know, they had no doubts about it. They were 100% behind it. So I'm not a person that keeps quiet, you know, like I don't just stay in the background and do whatever. Like I wanted to get out there and
yes,
tell everyone, you know. So
yes,
you know, Instagram, right? So people take pictures and all that. So
yes,
I found some comics, some little memes that someone drew that was like making fun of Noah's Ark, or
yes.
showing some of the scientific stuff, and it was kind of comical. And so I posted that on Instagram, and a lot of church members, you know, saw it, and they got kind of upset, you know. And so what ended up happening was, it's funny, you know, while I was doubting, and I was asking questions and thinking about what was going on in my life, nobody really paid attention all that much, you know. But when I started making it public, now all of a sudden it was a big deal. And so the young pastor made an appointment with me and my wife at the time to meet with them in the conference room, and we sat down and had, you know, maybe half an hour. We talked, and I was like, okay, these are the questions I have. These are the issues that, you know, I think are important, that are wrong. And he didn't really have any good suggestions or good ideas. He was just like, you know, he picked up his Bible and was like, if you don't believe this is right, then there's nothing I can do for you, you know. And it was probably a couple of weeks after that, you know, my wife was getting ready to go to church, and she was at the door, and she's like, are you coming with me? You know, it's like, I don't see a point to it, you know. So I stayed home, and one of my closest friends that I had grown up with, we'd known each other since grade 2, you know, like we'd gone to school all 12 years, and we always hung out every week, just about.
Mm.
So he called on the phone, and we talked for maybe an hour, about, and we didn't really get anywhere. We're just kind of arguing back and forth, and that was the last time I ever talked to him. I mean, it was just, that was it.
Okay. Yeah.
So someone that you've literally known since you were 6 or 7 years old,
Mm.
and you see him twice a week for the rest of your life, and then bam.
Mm. That's
never see him
the
again.
Christianity loves.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had a couple of cousins that I was very close to. We'd hung out again our entire lives.
Mm-hmm.
They were both a little bit younger by a couple of years, but they were really, really cool kids. They were smart. They were, one of them was a pastor in Kentucky now, and the others with his dad in California. But they basically, I've never talked to them again since then. About 6 months after I stopped going to church, my wife decided to move back to her family's home, which was about 3 hours away. So we separated. And then what was interesting was, so I had a sit down meeting with the young pastor that kind of took over, and we had this conversation, and that was the last time I talked to him. But the older pastor, the one that baptized me when I was 12, 13 years old, preached at my graduation from high school, preached at my wedding, know me from birth, probably the person that knew me the longest, never said it would never contact me at all. Mm-hmm. So no emails, no text, no phone calls. I mean, absolutely nothing at all. Mm-hmm. So there was only about 3 people that really contacted me that wasn't immediate family. There was an older deacon in the church, and the friend that I mentioned, and then the younger pastor. So those 3 people out of 200, were the only 3 that really tried to make contact. And so since then, the last 4 years, this was late 2017 when this happened, August, September 2017. So ever since then, I always try to stay in contact with whoever I can in the church. So on Instagram, Facebook, however, I try to maintain some kind of a connection, because you never know who is doubting. You don't know who is who's considering, leaving. And so just maybe 6 months ago, I was talking on Instagram with a kid who's, he's like 19, 20 years old. And he's very strongly doubting everything he's taught. And so we've established kind of a friendship that I'm sure his parents don't know about. And I'm sure he's basically putting on the face and going to church. And then to me, he says, he doesn't want anything to do with it. And he wants to move out and get away from it. So I want to be there to support the people that might be doubting, because, no one was there for me. I had to just go it alone and figure things out on my own. So it was a life-changing experience,
I use 5 years from the time adopt to get out. 5 years. Up and down. I shall go out. I shall not go out. I shall go out. Fram og tilbake. And at the end, I get out. But I was in the Pentecost movement, Pentecost congregation in 13 years.
Yeah.
But not like you. You get in as a child. I get in as an adult. I
Right.
was 26 years old. But my understanding of evolution in universe or things, that was very weak and very easy. When I went in the Pentecost movement, I don't believe in Adam and Eva. It was a fairy tale for me. But more and more, I started to believe it.
Yeah.
Because
It's
the
a
environment.
slow process. Yeah. They call it, acclimation. So humans are very good at adapting to changing environments.
Yeah.
So when you go from your normal life to the church, you will acclimate to that environment, and you will change your mind to conform to that social group. And that's exactly what they want you to do. Don't retain your individuality. Be like us. Just do everything what we tell you to do.
Just came like you are, but be like us. This says.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a YouTube channel. Can you tell about that? You said that you speak out. You like to speak out, just like me. I like to speak out. I will not shut up what that I experienced in the Pentecost. I will give I don't know what you call in America.
Give them hell.
Give them hell. Yes, I will give them hell. Okay, and I will speak out. I will warning young people, especially young people. I know you first time through a YouTube video on YouTube, and I contacted you. So can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a YouTube channel from when I was still in the church, and I would just put up, videos from vacation and whatever else. And so I didn't really start a new channel just for church stuff, but I basically just I uploaded a video probably 6 months after I left. Maybe it was more like a year, because there was a lot of time of adjustment and trying to figure out what I was going to do and what I really wanted. And then finally I realized, everything kind of solidified.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I need to tell my story. So I basically, I put on a suit and I put up the camera and I sat down in front of it, and I think I did it at one take. I didn't edit the video at all. I just started talking, and just whatever came to my mind, I just went with it, and I didn't second guess myself or anything. I just uploaded it and off it went. And that's my highest watched video out of everything else on the channel.
That's video I see. That video I see. No, okay, I don't interrupt. That
no,
was
no, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, just go on.
But I did other videos where I tried to get into other topics and kind of did educational stuff, but they weren't as popular because I think that first video was so raw. It was just, I was just spilling all the information, and it was very emotional. And so I think that captures people's attention when they see it. And it's been very interesting, to see the reactions, because people post comments every day, about, oh, you got to go back to church. Oh, you're just a reprobate and you're bitter. And then the other people are like, oh, thank you for doing that. And I'm in the same situation, and it's just person after person after person, week after week, and it's just it's almost like you can't keep up with all the stuff. There's I think it's mostly positive. There's mostly people that recognize it's real and it's going on. So I'm glad I did that. I started becoming more. I put out more of a variety. I started writing a blog, which the blog doesn't get a lot of traffic because who wants to read a blog? I mean, you can listen to a podcast, you can watch a video. Most people don't want to read just an article someone wrote. It's kind of old-fashioned even, but sometimes I like to write, and it's easier to write than to record a video or do audio. So I do a blog once in a while, and then I was listening to a podcast. This is probably 4 years ago, and it was called Naked Mormonism. And so they were getting into the history of the Mormon Church, and they would talk about the policies and the doctrines and how the Mormon Church got started. And I was like, that's a really cool idea, because it's naked. They're showing everything about the Mormon Church. And so I sent a message to the guy that writes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I sent a message to the guy that makes the podcast, and I said, I want to make one for my religion. They call it Naked Pentecostalism. How do you think about that? Is that okay? And he goes, yeah, just, go for it. And, he doesn't care about the rights to the trademark. So I started a podcast called Naked Pentecostalism, and that's been really fun because audio is sometimes easier than video. You just need a microphone and a little bit of intro music and outro music, and you can edit it. It's easier to edit audio than video. It's quicker. So I did that for a while, and it's been really surprising how widespread that goes. I see people. I look at the statistics. I see people listening in Australia and Great Britain and other parts of Asia even, and it's like it really grows, and it's amazing that people that are in the countries where they don't speak English are listening to an English podcast. So it's always kind of interesting.
But the English is world language.
Yes. It's very common.
Many understand English. This podcast I make, I speak Norwegian, only for Norwegian. So yeah.
So yeah, I think it's important to try to have that activism and try to just get the information out as much as possible. And if it helps one person, like the kid I'm talking to, then it's worth all the effort and the time, just to get a couple people from losing their lives to this.
Only the one, and I have success.
Right.
I have success.
Right, because you reach one person, then that person reaches someone else, and you start to tear it apart. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. I shall read up something. They can look like unprofessional, but my message get out. So what I found very interesting is to see that atheism, especially in the United States, is growing faster than growing in the regular Pentecostal movement. In the internet, with YouTube, social platform, better schooling, and constantly new discoveries in evolution and the universe, medical science, etc., are not only helping to the de-Christianity the world, but also fit the world's religions. With a few keystrokes on the small gadgets in your pocket, you can get useful information that put Christianity into the fantasy genre such as Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. Only here in Norway do Christianity media write about Christianity, which is a retreat in Western country, but also grown in the third world, where the knowledge is low and literacy is high. But even there, things are starting to move as the internet progresses. Elon Musk has launched the satellite that provides the internet to the countries where the internet is not common. Like example, now where Musk has opened satellite connection that provides internet to the hard-hit Ukraine. So then the question, Isaac, is there a reduction in growth in UPC? Do you notice that decline in your local environment, the state and the US, not least among the political locally and regionally? Have you given any thoughts about this?
Yeah, it's definitely slowing. One of the indications is the general conference. They meet, maybe 100 churches, come together, and they all join the same group to, it's a big party sort of thing. It's thousands of people sometimes, and they take attendance, every year, and so that number has gotten smaller and smaller. And I think with the pandemic, a lot of people have been staying home, and they watch church on video, webcam, and that's kind of gotten people out of the routine and out of their habits and rhythms. So it's disrupted some of that attendance. But I've heard that the UPCI in the United States is about 600,000 people, which is quite a bit lower than they used to be. But I think the real issue is, like you were saying, getting literacy and internet out to third world countries, because that's where the Pentecostals are growing, is in Africa and South America, or the Philippines, where there's a lot of poor people, and they can just gather them up and tell them what to do, and tell them they'll get all kinds of financial blessings if they give to the church, and people just eat that up. So yes, in Norway and the United States and England, Germany, Spain, countries where we have healthcare, we have college education, we have internet, there's very low participation. It's very hard to get people to buy into it, because mostly they push fear, right? It's fear that there's a lot of crime, and you better get into church, and there's war and famine and disease, so get into church and save your soul. But if you have a country where it's stable and there's no problems, it's very hard to push fear on someone when they have no fears, nothing to really worry about all that much. So that's why they've had a hard time in Oslo, where there's 1 million people, because what reason do you have to join unless they find someone who's emotionally
Can
vulnerable.
the Oslo is 630 about 600,000
Okay.
30 people. Yes, yes.
That sounds about right.
I forgot to mention that. Yes. Oh, yeah,
So
just
600,
go on.
yeah, so 630,000 people. So yeah, it's about they find the right person who's in a bad situation and they're vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why they send missionaries out to Peru and Brazil, and they send them to Mozambique and all these different small countries where they can just set up shop and no one's gonna argue with them, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
They can just gather up a bunch of people and tell them their side of it, and no one can cross-reference or examine anything because they have no internet and they have no literacy and they have no schools. That's exactly what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So they thrive in the Philippines, and they thrive in Mexico and different countries like that. So it's I'm encouraged by there's a company called Ideas Without Borders. So they try to go into countries like Turkey and Iran and Saudi Arabia, and they try to print different atheist books in Muslim languages. So they try to spread these ideas
Mm-hmm.
that are maybe hard to propagate in those countries, and they're doing really amazing stuff as far as there's not a lot of web pages that are in I'm trying to think of I'm drawing a complete blank with the languages, but the languages that are typically spoken in Iraq and in Turkey and Iran, there's actually not a lot of web pages that are in their language.
Mm-hmm.
So Ideas Without Borders is translating like Wikipedia pages on evolution and atheism and some of these things, and they're trying to make them available to people that have never had access to the internet before.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that's going to make a big difference, I think, in the next 10 years, 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
as people will start to grow up in those regions with access to the internet. That's going to be, I think, a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So we can hope.
Yes, I have a Facebook friends from the bush in Africa. Also far away out in the country. He sit with a mobile phone, some machine, ask about money, something. He ask about money. So. Corona, you mentioned Corona. How's the Corona situation in USA now? In Norway, we finished with that. That was finished with the war in Ukraine. Everyone forgot Corona. Is the same in USA? And how is your experience with the evangelical Christians? Trump, vice Biden, or yes, you have a word.
It's mostly back to normal. We still have a lot of people wearing masks.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a few people have stopped wearing masks. The last week or so, I haven't worn one in public the entire week, and I've gotten both vaccinations and the booster, and I've never had symptoms, I don't think, very much. So I think we're getting back to normal for the most part, and hopefully it stays that way, and we get the stocks going up so we get more money.
Yes, I'm same here.
So I know it's been kind of interesting to watch how the evangelicals have been very against masks and against vaccines, and they were
Mm.
like, it's the government trying to control us, and this is one world government taking over, and they're gonna delete all the currency, and it's gonna be one world government, blah 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 blah, and yet we see now things are kind of getting back to normal, and all that's false prophecy.
Yes. Oh, plenty. Yes.
So I think we're past the worst of it, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see once Ukraine settles down, kind of where the COVID will go back into the news, and we'll see maybe some more details about it. I was kind of curious to look at, see what the death rates were, and if there's been any big changes in that infections and deaths for COVID, but I haven't been able to really have a chance to look at it. But yeah, people have a very short attention span. Whatever is happening right now, that's what they're focused on. And
yeah, there's Ukraine. They have forgot. We have Norway. We have forgot Corona. No, er det Putin og Zelensky, Ukraine. I must read something to you. Norwegian is now a population of 5.3 million. 3,325 people are homeless. Of these are 142 children. 13% of 325 homeless people live in the street, which is 0.008% of Norwegian's population. There are people who are unable. There are people who are unable to live under a roof. They must live out because the illness, brain damage, or just alcohol. These are figures from 2020. Membership figures from Norwegian Church 2020 are 66%, and 30% of Norwegians believe in God. So I don't say this, Isaac. I don't say this for praise my country and far away from that. I use it for comparison. This is from United States, and arrest me if I get wrong. Okay, this is very important. This right. Sure. I give you right numbers. About 50% of the population of 332 million people in the United States of America believe in God. Over 500,000, 0.15%, live in the street, and the figures from the 2060 was that 1.6 million children are homeless. I do not have an overview of how many of them live in the streets. Maybe you know more about that. So the question, how can that happen? Despite the fact that 50% of US population, according to themselves, is a good Christian. Why? Can you explain that?
That's a good question, yeah.
Thank you.
I think the figures are pretty accurate. There's probably some margin of error, probably 10% either way, the exact figures. When you take a poll, you call people or you have a website, there's always going to be people that might lie, and they might say something that's not necessarily how they believe. But that's probably pretty accurate as far as the 50% of the population. And yes, we have very high numbers of homeless people in the United States. That's because we have expensive medical care. We have very expensive housing, and there's very little assistance programs. You know, there is some assistance programs like food stamps. There's housing assistance for people that are low income, but it's not always easy to get into. You know, there's a process to start that. So there's and of course there's people that are, they have mental health issues or drug and alcohol addictions, so they're not going to take advantage of some of those programs. But I've personally seen the homeless going up a lot in the last say 5 years or so, as things really I don't know exactly what's causing it, although the cost of housing itself is going up very fast, and the cost of rent and mortgages, you know, not everyone can afford it, and so we're seeing more and more people getting kicked out, and that's making it very difficult. But as you were saying, if 50% of the population is Christian, why aren't we helping more people? And that's basically a double standard, you know. So you say you love your neighbor, you say you want to care for people, but do they really do it? Do they actually follow through and live that? You know, and I would say no. You know, it's and I think your country is doing a better job of helping people, because you have universal health care, college is very inexpensive, and
Free.
there's a lot of welfare programs, you know, and so
you have
so your government is doing what the Christians won't do. You know?
we have a Christian party, Kristelig Folkeparti, and before the government change for government. Okay. At least to the end, I have one question to you. What do you want to say to Norwegian UPS Pentecostal and regular Pentecostal? Are you something special you will say to them? For I'm sure they follow me. Yeah, they follow me with illness eyes.
I mean, it's really just you know, you can't convince someone who is set in their ways, someone who's stubborn. You know, there are people, again, let's say Scientology, Jehovah's Witness, Mormons, any number of other small little cults that they're very obviously messed up. They're wrong, right? So it's obvious to everybody else except the people inside.
Yes.
And so no matter how much you're convinced that you are right, it's impossible to convince someone else unless they want to learn, unless they're curious and they want to know and understand more things. So I can't say anything that's going to change anybody's mind. I just encourage people to be curious and to want to keep learning, because that's what makes the difference, is looking for the answers and saying you're not just happy where you're at, but you want to know more and you want to grow and you want to be more. And so if a person is happy where they're at, then there's nothing you can say. It's a lost cause. So, you know, I just say a person needs to be curious. They need to constantly grow. I was at a library yesterday, and they had this piece of art on the wall. It was like a replica of a big tablet of stone that was chiseled out with with Arabic script.
Mhm.
So it was very, very old. It wasn't the original; it was a replica, but it was the Arabic script chiseled in stone, and the translation is seek knowledge from cradle to the grave. So I think that's a good motto to live by, and yeah, always try to learn, always try to, because there's no limit to what you don't know, right?
Mhm.
There's always something else.
Mm,
So just
mm,
constantly try to keep learning, try to learn more, because there's always something that you need to figure out.
mm.
And eventually in learning, you discover where you might be wrong and where someone else might be right, or where you're right and someone else is wrong. But the more you know, the more comfortable you can be in understanding all that.
Mm.
So yeah, that's, the Pentecostals are very, don't go to college, don't get education, because
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It-
so because then you might get too distracted, from what they're teaching.
Mhm.
But and education is very important.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's probably the biggest thing I would emphasize is just keep learning, keep being curious.
Yes,
Uh,
that's a very good wise word.
Thank you. Thank you.
Say hello to your love, your girlfriend, for
Yeah.
me. Yeah,
Well,
yeah. So
all right. Thanks for all taking the time to do the interview, and good luck with all your editing and splicing. And
thank you very much.
all right.